All right, ready?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Mitchell.
I'm Danny Sullivan.
I'm Noah John Marker.
And I'm Max Rutsky. And today we'll be discussing a few different articles written about the COVID pandemic from the perspective of HR leaders. The first article deals with crisis leadership. It's titled The 4 Behaviors That Help Leaders Manage a Crisis by Chris Nichols, Shoma Chatterjee, and Chris Tender. Overall, this article discusses 4 leadership behaviors to help organizations survive the coronavirus crisis. The first is making decisions with speed over precision. It can be difficult to make decisions when leaders have very limited time as well as resources. So it's recommended that they first start by defining 3 to 5 priorities of what they want to do with the business amidst this chaotic time. Then, when confronted with trade-offs, try and choose the best possibility with the information that you do have available. And finally, be sure to delegate authority to team members so they can make decisions on the fly when need be. Second, leaders need to be able to adapt boldly. This means using the available information they have to make decisions. Although information is definitely limited, there is still some out there. So use what you have and quickly make those decisions. And above all, communicate with frontline workers because they are in the thick of it, so to speak. So they'll definitely have a lot of information for what's going on. The third behavior is reliable delivery. Since things are unpredictable right now and leaders are establishing new priorities, they also need new metrics and key performance indicators to measure how successful priorities are, as well as what employee performance is like. So establish those new metrics and KPIs in order to determine, is the organization succeeding? The last behavior is engaging for impact. It's a terribly stressful time for all workers involved. So be sure to conduct 30-minute sessions to speak with employees and help them de-stress and improve morale. Share a positive message to boost morale and offer assistance where possible. Overall, I found that this article was very useful. It offered practical ideals to handle the current crises, and it helps leaders exercise their crisis leadership abilities. And with its connection to HR, it describes how leaders can go about managing their human resources, as well as how to measure their performance and make sure they're giving their workers purpose and focus through the new priorities that they establish. The second article is the fourth article, which is Real Leaders Are Forged in Crisis by Nancy Cohen. This article examines 4 methods used by historical and modern crisis leaders to overcome the crisis that they faced in their lifetime or that they're facing currently. The first method used by crisis leaders is acknowledging people's fears, then encouraging resolve. When people are afraid, they tend to freeze up and they don't react particularly well. So the idea is to try and quell their fears. That way you can give them hope and encourage them to engage in actions that will help carry us through this crisis, such as Franklin Delano Roosevelt did during the Great Depression. He tried to alleviate the fears of the American people and encourage them to engage in behaviors that would help them escape the Great Depression. Second, give people a role and a purpose. People may go into a panic if they don't know what they should be doing. So be sure to give them an established role and purpose so they can be distracted but also productive, such as Martin Luther King Jr. did when he encouraged people of the civil rights movement to conduct sit-ins and also freedom rides. That way people were distracted, they had an idea of what they should be doing, and they weren't panicking. Third, emphasize experimentation and learning. When you're confronted with unconventional problems, use unconventional solutions. such as Ernest Shackleton, who went on an expedition to the Arctic, but ultimately faced a shipwreck. Through this experience, he helped the crew by first establishing camp on the boat, then establishing camp on the iceberg they crashed into, and finally mounting rescue missions to travel back to the mainland, and he successfully got all of his crew members out of there. And fourth, although this wasn't associated with an existing leader, or a prior one, be sure to tend to people's energy and emotional needs. People will inevitably be worn down by the stress of this situation, so be sure to encourage them and make sure that they're engaging in healthy behaviors. Overall, a very inspiring article that uses past leaders and a few current ones to illustrate how America has faced crises before and can overcome the current pandemic. And with its connection to HR, this article suggests how leaders can take control of the situation and support their employees during the pandemic.
In this next article, it is the fifth article that is 15 questions about remote work answered. So the summary of this article, with remote work being a new reality, is crucial to adapt by using productivity at the advantage. The key points pulled from this article is for managers to create a constant accessibility for employees to ensure productivity and the feel of importance, to make sure that these employees are comfortable in their work. The next point is to accommodate employees with flexible hours due to children within the households and other family requirements that may be present within the household or within the family. Also, to trust in the employees so that they retain the drive needed to perform their work. This includes just making sure that employees feel like they can perform their work without being micromanaged, and they can have a more sense of being within the workplace as they are working remotely. The final point is to engage in constant contact with employees via virtual meetings, phone calls, texts, emails, etc., just to make sure that there's a constant engagement in conversation, as it is important throughout the workday to have these short conversations to more so build your morale and give you the drive to go throughout the day. And also will keep employees engaged, giving opportunity to ask questions, present new ideas, and even present disagreements with possible ideas or old engagement. The overall review is very useful, presents ways for employees to work properly remotely and creates a better workflow. The connection to HR, it allows managers to understand the business and the employee, and then making employees comfortable, allowing them to perform. And this next article is the sixth article, is how to manage coronavirus with compassion. The overall summary, as layoffs are difficult to perform in general, it is particularly important to be human, quote unquote, in this instance, and by doing so during the times of COVID-19. This first key point that was pulled from the article is to take great care in presenting the news to employees, as it will be difficult for them to bear being performed remotely. This next topic that was pulled from the article is to explain the circumstances due to coronavirus, expressing that it isn't because of their performance. This creates more comfort and respect towards the employee. And this third key point is to focus on the employee. By so doing, present counseling or any other assistance, but it is very important to not make promises that cannot be kept. The overall review is that it is extremely useful tools and allows leaders to understand the psychological aspect of layoffs. And along with the connection to HR, it gives managers the tools needed to properly perform layoffs, and it allows the employees to feel safer and more comfortable during these difficult times. And this next article is the seventh article, which is your employee tested positive for COVID-19. What do you do? In the overall summary, when an employee confirms a positive test for COVID-19, it is also another instance where it is important to remain human and understanding and express sympathy, but also more importantly, to act fast. The first key point that was pulled from this article is while remaining understanding, it is crucial for managers / human resources to take precautions and inform every employee that may be at risk of COVID-19. The next key point is if employees have questions, keep information confidential, but still inform the workplace of the possible risk. And the third key point is to recommend employees to visit their doctors in case of risk. And this final fourth key point, as managers, it is important to check in on employees and that have tested positive to make sure that the employees have a feeling of importance and appreciation within their workplace still. The overall review is that it was also very useful tools for managers to understand and use, and also presents the correct order of how to deal with the situation or situations. And the connection to HR is that it allows for managers to take necessary action and to inform those at risk. It is keeping employees information confidential.
So this is the 8th article, and it's called How Can't Close Retailers Are Keeping Workers Safe? In the article, it goes over about how stores are reducing store hours to give their cleaning crews time to go throughout the store and make sure every single product is wiped down, as well as the store is clean. And that's not only for the safety of the customers, but as well as for the safety of the employees, as well as they're encouraging families to only send one person into shop, and that's just to reduce the number of people overall within the store. And they're limiting the amount of returns people can do, because during times of crisis, people often tend to hoard items, and by limiting the returns that people can do, it prevents people from going to the store and buying massive quantities of food or other products, and then going back to return them later when they don't sell them off outside the supermarket. And they all talk about having the funds to reward employees. Often during these times, employees aren't going to want to work because it risks their own safety as well as the safety of the people they're around. So they talked about how employers during this time are raising wages of employees to kind of encourage them to keep working. And one of the key people in this that they talked about in the article was Costco. They did some great things there to help keep the employees safe as well as the customers. And one of those things was they took the plexiglass from like the seafood counters and they helped put it up on the registers to help keep employees and the customers themselves safe from possible spread of coronavirus. And that goes into prioritizing the customer safety, because in the end, they're the main people you're concerned with. You want to prioritize the customers and the employees before you care about the shareholders. The article itself, it does a great job telling the employees things that they can do to help out their employees and the customers during this time. And it's got great advice on how to keep your business operating. And the connection I have to HR with this article is that just overall, it gives some great employer advice on things that you can do to help keep your workers safe and your customers safe. As an employer, it's your main priority to make sure your work staff's able to keep going. And this article does a great job explaining to them different steps that they can take throughout the process to keep them motivated as well as healthy during this time. The next article is how to manage your stress when the sky is falling. In the article, it goes over how during this time, many people are stressed out. And with the whole event going on, prolonged stress is going to be very common among employees. And that's just not healthy. It goes over how you can take some breathing exercises and other things to help relax yourself and get yourself to calm down. You should create a routine. Many people during this, they get out of their normal schedule, waking up, getting dressed and going to work, and then coming home. You need to maintain that routine to keep yourself in the business cycle. And that way when you end the day, you know you're at your home time. Often people aren't connecting with their workers during this time either. You're at home all day and you're on your computer and you're not having that face-to-face interaction. So it's very important to reach out to other employees and kind of talk to them and make sure that you're staying connected, help create that social interaction and keep yourself aware of what's going on. And the most important thing they talked about is find meaning in what you're doing. You don't want to just know you're doing the task. You want to know how that's going to help, and that's what gets you to keep going forwards. When you have that meaning, that drives you on knowing like, okay, I'm working towards this, not just I want to try to get this done. So the article gives great self-help tips to people there, and it talks about how to stay motivated during this time. And the connection it has to HR is it gives workers advice on how they can stay motivated and healthy. Most important thing is to stay motivated for employees. And as an employer, you should make sure your workers themselves aren't falling behind and getting depressed or sad during this time. As their mental health is the most important thing for the company, because if they're not in there mentally, they're not going to operate at their highest level. And the last article talked about 3 tips to avoid working from home burnout. You need to have that work separation, as I kind of previously mentioned. And that's when you go to work and come home. Those are 2 separate things, but they often find that when people are working from home, they kind of still are working even when they're off the clock. So one thing that they can do about this is kind of work on checking your email. People often send late emails at home, and even if you're not working and you know you don't need to respond, just knowing that you have that email creates a sense of urgency that you need to talk to them and say what's going on. And that kind of brings your work life back into your home life, as well as maintaining your appearance. No one's going to see you while you're working from home, but you should still dress up in business attire as well as stay well groomed, just to kind of give yourself that sense that you're still going into the office and you're maintaining professional appearance, because that helps you out on differentiating home from work life. And you need to create boundaries. As I kind of talked about with the emails, you need to know when you should be working and when you shouldn't. Sometimes there's going to be family time and sometimes there's going to be work time, and they may overlap at points, but so long as you know that you're working at this time and you get your work done, that's okay. And you should focus on the big picture. The key thing that they talked about was during the pandemic, employees are often doing small little tasks to look productive, but it's not focusing on the big picture. When you're working on a project, you need to focus on the end goal instead of a bunch of small little things that make it look like you're doing a lot of work, when in reality, you're just avoiding the big task at hand. So by doing that, it prevents you from falling behind. This article overall did an effective job explaining the very simple things that separate your home life from your work life. Now, it gives the reader great advice on how to effectively operate at home when you're working to help keep that work appearance and work productivity. The connection to HR in this article is it has to do with employees keeping up with their work-life balance. It does a great job of going into things to avoid doing as an employee that will allow you to help keep that productivity level up and help give you great advice on how to focus on the end result of what you're doing.
All right, so the first article I have is entitled That Discomfort You Are Feeling is Grief. The first way to manage grief is to first acknowledge it exists. You may have heard before of the 5 stages of grief, these being denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. This was co-wrote by David Kessler, the writer of this article. He also adds with it now, though, a new stage that Kyle somewhat mentioned called finding meaning. Kessler mentions that there is a sort of collective grief that is due to the loss of normalcy, loss of connection, and fear of economic toll. These are some of the different types of grief that many people are experiencing. Another one, in addition to that, is anticipatory grief, which is a part of this grief, meaning grief over the uncertainty of what the future holds. It is important to find balance in your thinking, to come into the present and to let go of what you can't control, and also stock up on compassion in a time like this, especially when so many people at this time are on edge. This current situation and these feelings will pass, but in the meantime, it is important to try and find meaning and appreciate what you have. This article does a great job of not only addressing those areas of grief and the different types of them, but it also offered practical advice on how to best accept this and find meaning with it. I related this to HR in terms of the safety and health of an organization's employees, because those fall under the scope of HR, both physical and mental health. So the next article was entitled, Ensure That Your Customer Relationships Outlast Coronavirus. Many small and large businesses both are now forced to find the balance between generating sales and respecting the threats to life and livelihood that have altered consumers' priorities and preferences. The author of this article identifies 5 key strategies that help companies weather crises like this and help preserve their relationships with their customers. It is the acronym HEART. First one being to humanize your company. This means to empathize with them and let the customers or consumers know you understand the dire circumstances that they're in and that you're in, and that profit is not your one and only concern. This is easily reached through social media means that show how you are helping customers, employees, and other stakeholders during this crisis. The second letter would be educate about change. Let your customers know about any changes to your company's operation, whether it be the new hours, facility closures, staff reductions, customer service availability, etc. Be proactive in getting that information to the customer so that they don't think your products and services are completely unavailable due to the pandemic. The next letter would be assure stability. Assure customers that your values and mission statement have still not changed, even if certain in-person attributes were a successful part of your business that you can no longer offer. Let the customers know how you are prepared to maintain those value propositions. Next would be revolutionize offerings. It was said in The Art of War by Sun Tzu that chaos presents opportunity for innovation. I think we can all agree that this is a very chaotic time for all of us, which means the opportunity for creation, invention, and building a new future is better than ever. Inform your customers about new innovations and opportunities you provide, and this will instill hope in the customer for your company both during and after this pandemic. Lastly, tackle the future. In addition to complying with government-imposed limitations during these times, you should let your customers know that you are going above and beyond what is required for their benefit. Assure them that you will not only weather this storm, but that you're learning and improving upon your company and how it operates during this time. Own this situation and let your customers be aware that you are doing so. This article did a great job at preparing businesses to weather this crisis and preserving their relationships. I related this to HR in the terms of the policies and procedures of a company during the coronavirus, because they are bound to change. Therefore, the employees and the customers need to both be made aware of those changes. Next article is called What Will U.S. Labor Protection Look Like After Coronavirus? This article showed how people on the lower end of the wage distribution have been more disproportionately affected by the coronavirus. It shed a lot of light on the U.S. as a whole in terms of our government and economic system that has failed workers, and employers alone are not going to be able to fix. Deep inequalities between the haves and the have-nots are being exposed, especially in relation to employee protections like affordable health care, remote work access, paid time off, and job security. There are 24 million uninsured working age adults in the U.S., and 25% of U.S. workers have no access to paid leave. A plethora of these issues are caused by the shift executives made in the 70s to prioritize dividends for shareholders over protecting their employees. Many now are looking to different solutions such as more sick leave and universal health care to ease the stress that many frontline workers are facing. This would also allow the U.S. to raise the rate of self-employment, as the U.S. has lower rates than those with universal health care and other policies previously mentioned. In addition, we could help lessen the wildly increasing level of unemployment by implementing a broad range of public works and conservation projects, similar to FDR's New Deal program that Max had somewhat touched on. That program had hired 60% of the unemployed and reduced inequality greatly. This article has addressed that now more than ever, it is time to enact permanent policies that can protect all workers. I related this to HR because this relates a lot to employee protections and benefits such as health insurance, sick leave. These benefits, as well as labor relations in general, I think will be more likely reanalyzed by many companies in the near future. The last article that I had was We Need Imagination Now More Than Ever. It's clear that this is a time of crisis management, and imagination is a key factor in creating both a new and better future for us all. It's much more likely that we will have a drastically different future than a return to the status quo after this coronavirus pandemic has ended. So this will require great imagination to create that future. Companies that invest in new growth areas during recessions and downturns have been notoriously outperforming those that do not. It is better to shape a new environment than to adapt to one. Another way said is better to be proactive than reactive. So companies that are implementing visionary and shaping strategies have been doing a lot better. In this article, it talks about several measures that do foster imagination. One being carve out time for reflection. In a time of constant updates, emails, news breaks, it is important to remember that you should still remain focused on the big picture. Don't be reactionary in just a fight or flight type of style, but also a rest and digest style, which requires more time for reflection. Be willing to ask advice and ask open questions, questions that prompt exploration of new ideas and approaches that you or your company could implement. Allow yourself to be playful. Allowing yourself to be playful on occasion, especially in times of stress, is critical in relieving stress and helping one actually remain more productive. Set up a system for sharing ideas in your company. Ideas are not just an individual effort. You need to facilitate collective imagination in your organization. This can be done while ideas are even still in development. You can use forums or in any other casual way. Trying to just remain sensible and practical during these times will kill creativity before it even gets the chance to exist. Seek out the anomalous and unexpected. Imagination is fostered by new strategies and triggered by surprising inputs. So reframing a problem can help come up with new solutions. Encourage experimentation. Even though budgets are likely tight in many organizations, one's ideas can never become useful unless they are put out into the real world to be practiced. And lastly is to stay hopeful. Losing hope and or admitting defeat halts creativity and imagination more than anything else. Especially in a leadership role, it is important to make sure that you are fostering an environment that gives people both hope and the space to be creative. I related this article in the context of HR in that it fosters an imaginative staff and workplace, touches on aspects such as training and development, leadership consultation, and office environment.
And that was our presentation over the many different HR articles that have arisen from COVID, and each one illustrates how we can go about improving the environment for workers, staff, leaders, and customers. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope you enjoyed.